would like to start asking you, how would you describe your dream of interactive storytelling?
Okay, well, I've been thinking about intelligent computers supported role play. So my current dream in 3 branches, which I keep trying to get funded but failing so far, we thought about a table-based version where you all sit around a touch table or something like this.
Yeah.
So my dream environments will have multiple people in them, because
Yeah.
I'd like human-human interaction as well as human-system interaction.
Mm.
So my thesis is partly that the deficiencies in human-machine interaction, which we certainly have still, and until we get complete natural language processing, we're going to continue to have,
Mm.
are being mitigated to some extent by having human-human interaction as part of the same experience. So I'm not any longer thinking about one person sitting in front of a computer.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what I'm thinking about. So, table-based scenario.
Yeah.
Then what we called a stage-based scenario, which would be an instrumented room, essentially, with big screens,
Yeah.
Kinects, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then a pervasive version where you're out in the big wide world, mostly with handheld devices.
Yeah.
Maybe if you get a nice environment like the campus here, you can stick a few sensors in trees and things like this. So my dream is kind of a little bit large scale. My dreams often are. Yeah? And the idea would be to develop all of the software and materials infrastructure behind that, which would involve, obviously, an authoring system, would draw on experience with live role play, which is one of the reasons we're running this live role play next year.
Yeah.
Would also have support for a facilitator. So a lot of these role players, I think all interactive role play needs a facilitator of some kind to shape the experience.
Yeah. You cannot have a computer doing that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you could, but my idea was that you'd have essentially facilitator support in the system, so the facilitator wouldn't have to do very much.
Yeah.
So you reduce the role of the facilitator. Currently, a lot of it would be pre-specified support, which again is what happens with live role play. It's one of the things I think the live role play game master thinks about, is what shaping support am I going to need during this? Often carried out through actors, but you have to actually brief the actors, and the actors have to go and do their stuff live with the interaction around them, and presumably improvise somewhat. I'd be interested to see how that pans out. So yes, my dream has sort of lurched away from the user sitting at the keyboard quite substantially.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because this guy Björn, he's working also with that, with the coffee tables and this, and I think in the future maybe, you know, with this role play thing next year with writers and so on, it could be interesting for him.
Well, one of the things we've got to do with that live role play is to think carefully about the evaluation around it. Oh, here's another person to involve in it. I was talking to Juicer about this. I've already involved Lynn in it, because the idea would be to build the evaluation into the experience. Now, Lynn's first question was, what do you want to evaluate? And of course, engagement is one of the things we would like to evaluate, of course. And the impact of particular devices that the game master is using, what is the actual effect of those on the people that they actually impinge upon? So how do the shaping mechanisms actually interact with the people in the live role play is also an interesting thing to evaluate in my view. So trying to think, I mean, this live role play is not just to have fun, although it is to have fun.
No.
But the idea would be to use it as essentially a large experiment.
Okay, so the state of the art within AI in relation to interactive storytelling, what would you say that is? Is it going down?
Disappointing at the moment, I would have said. Every time I see someone doing this, because the issues are so difficult, they're bouncing away from the issues and bouncing back into same old mechanisms, same old, you know, away from interactivity. So I don't see people really trying hard to deal with challenges of interactivity, in fact. Every time, because they're hard, I mean, we know they're hard. And all that happens is people bounce in, see that it's hard, and then bounce out, and go back to branching or, you know, same old. So I don't see anyone really working very hard on the interactivity issues. And you get things which to me are kind of a bit futile, like interactive film. There's no way that's ever going to be anything other than branching, you know? and it's just in the nature of film.
Exactly.
It's just not the interactive medium.
No.
And the other thing that concerns me is people's failure to think carefully about the distinction between naturalism and drama in a lot of cases, not in all cases. So I think the work they're doing in America, I think the work that Mark Rydell and Brian Gerko do is very interesting, very useful. They've been looking at improv and things like this in a very serious sort of way. But most people seem to me to be addicted to film naturalism, which is a very puzzling sort of thing for me, and based entirely on a superficial resemblance between the graphical medium and the film medium. And in other ways they seem to be completely orthogonal.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. So the answer, can AI tell an engaging story?
Well, not at the moment.
No, exactly.
We know that.
Yeah. But we could perhaps have an AI assistant to a game master in a live role play.
Well, this is what I was... So, yes, I mean, other people's solution is to stick with the technology and back off the interaction. And I suppose my solution, given we know it's a difficult problem, is to back off the technology a little bit and make it more of an assistive technology and try and draw, leverage the word we're looking for here, I hate that word, try and draw on the virtues of the human part of the system and try to cover some of our deficiencies. I mean, the problem of interaction is fundamental. Every time I do a project, we walk smack into the fact that you cannot converse with the characters. You cannot converse with the characters. Apart from the speech rec problems you can just about solve. All the, the full natural language problem suddenly starts biting in the ankle. And though we have some very good dialogue people here, their dialogues are all in very narrow domains, like restaurants, Not in story domains, they're in functional domains where the task structure gives you really good clues. You can have a huge corpus and use statistical methods. That works with words in speech rec because people speak loads of words and you can do that statistically. But language actions are too varied in their structure, I think, for this approach to be a very, very sensible one to apply.
Exactly. And this idea of if you even could have the AI to do this, there's a long distance from making that to having a good author. And make an interesting story and so on.
And
even
also
humans, how many good authors are there?
But a fundamental problem, which I think is also not really addressed, is that we don't have an understood authoring approach to interactive narrative. So the other problem is that the people who are good at narrative authoring tend not to have any idea about interactive authoring, which is why looking at improv and live role play is interesting. Because there you have people who know how to author in those environments. Now the guys in Southern California hit this problem. I mean, they're right next to Hollywood, They have very good script writers. And they said the minute we tried to involve script writers, there are tons of unemployed script writers around there. We discovered that they wanted to do it the way they do it for film. And we couldn't get them to change their mindset at all. And most of us learn how to author linear narrative. That's when we write stories at school. That's what we're learning how to do. And I mean, our slogan was learn to let go. You have to let go to author the kind of narrative we're thinking about. In certain ways, you have to accept that you're not in control of the experience in the way you would have been if you were actually writing it, because you're co-creating with the people in the experience.
Definitely,
I think one of the problems with the authoring issue is that nobody has properly specified the authoring process. Just what's involved in doing the authoring from a problem level specification rather than a technology. So everyone again thinks of it in terms of game construction, where you have the resources, you have the all the sets and the characters and the branching, and as if this was the authoring problem. And clearly I think the authoring problem is not that if you want something interactive. If you want to move away from the sort of branching, I know what all the branches are going to be approach to authoring.
I would say that the challenge is to sustain engagement when you have the different events that you lay out in the environment or whatever. So the field, where do you think it's moving? Overall, if you step back from your own work and say, okay, that you already mentioned someone in the States, and what about Germany? And
bits of it are moving in circles, I suspect. Don't we all do that when we have difficult problems?
Exactly.
So I think there's some. I like the work that they're doing in in Georgia. I think that's very nice work. I think the stuff that Michael Mateus is doing is good, but has definite limitations. But I would have said that about Facade. I mean, Facade was a mind-boggling achievement, but you cannot do it like that, in my view. You just cannot do it like that. And Prom Week, which is a very American take on it, is, you know, it's not a very narrative environment.
Exactly.
So you're solving the problem here by moving away from narrative structure into sort of
schemas.
Schematic, And again, the authoring problem for Prom Week is mind-bogglingly horrible. If you look at the number of rules they've got in their system, and everyone knows, I say everyone, people who've been around long enough to remember expert systems in the 1980s, of which there are now not so many of us. Everyone who's been through that experience knows that if you get a system with hundreds and hundreds of rules, you lose control of it, because all the rules start interacting in ways you didn't expect. So everyone knows that, except everyone doesn't know that because it's too long since last time for people to know that. So I don't think that's a good way of doing it, which doesn't mean I don't respect the achievement, if you see what I mean. I think the achievement is considerable, but I still don't think you do it like that. You see, I'm quite stroppy. I have sort of strong views about how one should do things.
I'm on your side on this, definitely. So the combination of interactive storytelling and learning, where do you think that's heading now? You initiated the Fear Not and other projects, you know, which is concerned with learning, but do you think there's some potential there?
Yes, there's huge potential because I mean, what we've been interested in is the style of education where you're interested in behaviour change, attitudes, and so on. All very difficult areas and seldom tackled, and particularly seldom tackled in the educational establishment because they're difficult and they're hard to measure, and there's a sort of rather bureaucratic managerial approach to education, which you see in modern education. It's not very conducive to doing things with role play. So we have trouble getting funding for these ideas, mainly because people want guaranteed pedagogical outcomes.
Yeah, we need an assessment method to show that this is beneficial. Somehow,
I mean, we did a huge study with Fear Not, and we did manage to demonstrate some benefit, but it nearly killed us doing that sample size. And we've never managed to do one like that since, and we won't manage to do it in the current project on that sort of scale.
What was the scale?
Oh, we had 1,000 subjects.
Over different countries, right?
In 2 countries, in Germany and in the UK. I mean, we did it all properly. And even then, what we were able to demonstrate was essentially fairly limited. We had limited exposure, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, role play is a peripheral technique in education. My feeling is that by supporting it with technology, you could actually apply it much more widely, because it's quite intimidating for a normal classroom teacher who hasn't done it before. How are they going to do it? You know, how are they going to retain control of it? Teachers always worry about losing control of pupils. How do they know it will work and anyone will learn anything from it? So typically it's left to specialists to do it. It's not a routine technique in most classrooms for most teachers. And my educational hypothesis is if you can provide technology support for it, then teachers would be more confident about using the technique, and then they would apply it in more situations, and that would be educationally beneficial, because I think there are some things, not everything, I mean, there's some things which are best taught in that sort of narrative fashion, of which maths is not one.
Exactly,
But, you know, looking at aspects of social science and looking at aspects of history, at conflicts in areas like geography, anything where there are social and political dimensions in education, and I think those are very well supported by this kind of narrative role play. But teachers are reluctant to do it because it's difficult. So if you look at a really good company with technology, we worked for a while with a company called Immersive Education down in Oxford, a small company, and produced some very, very nice software. But what's always been distinctive about them is the amount of educational support behind their software. So they have a storyboarding tool called Cartouche that we used a lot when we were building Fear Not to gather information about bullying. We used it as a data capture tool. And they've configured this for a number of different domains, where the idea is to get the children to use storyboarding to essentially express their ideas, think about problems and so on. But these are supported by great lodging handbooks with lesson plans and ideas and materials supporting it, very carefully thought out education. They have a thing called Media Stage, which is a 3D environment, which is specifically used to support media studies for 16 to 18-year-olds, where you can put people on stage, you've got lighting, and they've very carefully configured this to be relevant to the curriculum of that particular bit of education in the UK, so that it's easy for a teacher to use that software to support the objectives, their curriculum objectives. They've also got a 3D adventure maker environment, which unfortunately isn't on a Mac, which is why I haven't got it. I've got a copy of it somewhere. Yeah. Again, it's a nice system, but where they've scored is that when they supply technology, typically they develop the educational support for it. Now, that's a problem because you need the good technology first, and they nearly killed themselves producing Media Stage. They had a bunch of people doing 3D, who I think spun off into another games company, so we buggered off eventually.
Okay. Are they successful, this company, economically?
They survive.
Okay,
they're a small organisation, they're still around.
Yeah, great.
Which is an achievement in the educational software market, which is a very difficult market to survive in, because there's not a lot of money around. So their model has worked, so they do it by not taking too many risks, of course.
That's nice,
And the kind of thing I'm talking about is highly risky.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about sensors and big screens and putting stuff around different bits of the classroom. And, it's all. I guess a tabletop version would be the easiest one to start with for this sort of reason, which is one reason I was thinking about a tabletop version.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be less intimidating for teachers if you sit people around a little table and put a story like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. The last one for me is the concept of continuation desires we just talked about. Do you think that could be used in the development, now you're a computer scientist, of the AI parts of this role-playing system that you're talking about, where we imagine that we have a game master and we have the AI that assists the game master when we're running around in this environment, for example. The evaluation of continuation is I'm interested in if you think that's a good parameter.
It's an interesting one. If you can hide it. I mean, the important thing is that the decision becomes part of the experience. So I think actually, in my desired paradigm, putting sensors on people is not going to be very easy or sensible thing to do. So then it's a case of, can you infer it, or can you conceal the decision within the overall experience? So I think by asking people, do you want to continue, you're essentially telling them that they don't have to continue, and that's going to be a factor in their decision.
Yeah, of course,
So that's why I think you want to try and hide the decision if possible, so that people are making the decision implicitly rather than explicitly. But clearly making a decision, but within the overall narrativity of the environment.